Greek revival was, as I said, it was almost a mania. They built outhouses, they built capitals, there's so many things built in the Greek revival style. Toward the end of the Greek revival, or almost in the middle of it, again, a very important buoy of history, 1835, Washington Irving, who was, of course, the creator of Rip Van Winkle, and he was the first American man of letters to be recognized in England, or recognized abroad. When he came back in 1835, he bought this little generic Dutch farmhouse, and he had talked to Sir Walter Scott, who of course was writing romantic novels about medieval times. And he advised Washington Irving, who said, you don't have to go back to ancient world, you don't have to go back to medieval world, write about your own history in America. And he was actually of Scots descent, but he was very empathetic and into the whole world of Dutch New York. He was the first American writer to be recognized abroad. And he had a neighbor who was a painter named George Harvey, and asked him to help him remodel the place. And he told Harvey, quote, my idea is to make a little nookery, somewhat in the Dutch style, quaint but unpretending. And he's added, old Dutch cottages had crow steps on their gabled ends, so must mine. So it was remodeled to fit his romanticized image of a dwelling of the early Dutch period in New York. And Sunnyside is extremely modest in scale. 2.5-story addition to the right of the main house was added in the 1840s, but there's no question that this house is a buoy of history with a date of 1835, which bridged the American residential architecture from the twilight of the classical influence of the ancient world to the picturesque. Sunnyside was a turning point in taste that left the ancient world of Greece and Rome behind and drew from a wide range of precedents from the Gothic era to exotic structures. So our thanks can go to Washington Irving for a new direction, not just in the world of letters, but in the way he changed the direction of domestic architecture. From 1835 to 1876, this is really the picturesque era, sometimes called Victorian. We almost use the term Victorian as much or more as they do in England to describe the era, the period of the centennial celebration in Philadelphia. And that sparked a chauvinistic pride in our colonial heritage. And what that triggered from 1876 to 1929, the crash of the stock market, this is a whole period of reminiscent architecture, reminiscent of all kinds of things, Tudor times, French rural architecture, Cotswold cottages, Dutch era, and then also from about 1890 to 1914 or so, at the outbreak of the war, was the Gilded Age of what I call palatial palaces. And then from 1876 to 1929 and the 1930s, and then post-World War II, and the beginning of the modern movement, and the reaction to the excesses of the 19th century and the beginnings of the modern architecture through the 1920 stock market and the post-World War II era. And perhaps at the end of that, a brief overview of residential architecture from the 60s through the 21st century. And this is just a sampling of some of the buildings that we'll be viewing and discussing. And that's it. As you can probably gather, I'm a chatterbox, so I'll hang around if anybody has questions or wants to talk. But I'm also, this is the time if anybody wants one of my books.